I thought I knew my grandson. For 6 years, I watched him grow from a bewildered toddler into a silent shadow of a boy. The doctors had their theories. Autism, they said at first, then selective mutism, then a dozen other diagnoses that never quite fit. But Nathan never spoke. Not a word, not a sound. He communicated through gestures, through drawings, through those enormous hazel eyes that seemed to hold secrets too heavy for a child to carry. My name is Robert Chen, and I'm 67 years old. I spent 33 years as a high school history teacher in Vancouver before retiring to a quieter life in Victoria. My wife passed away 4 years ago from cancer, and since then, my son David and his wife Jessica have been my primary connection to family. They live in North Vancouver with Nathan, now 10 years old, in a modest craftsman home they bought during the real estate boom. This past November, everything I believed about my grandson, about my family, and about my own safety came crashing down in a single moment that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. David called me on a Tuesday evening. I could hear the stress in his voice immediately. "Dad, I need to ask you a massive favor," he said without preamble. "Of course. What's going on?" "Jessica's mother had a stroke. She's in the ICU in Edmonton. We need to fly out there tonight, but we can't find anyone to watch Nathan. His usual sitter is on vacation, and the respite care worker we sometimes use is fully booked. Could he possibly stay with you for a few days? Maybe a week?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Bring him over. I'll set up the spare room." "Dad, I know he's not easy. You remember how he is. Nathan is my grandson. I'll manage just fine." 2 hours later, David's Subaru pulled into my driveway. Nathan emerged from the back seat, clutching his worn blue backpack and a stuffed orca whale he'd had since he was 3. He looked up at me with those watchful eyes but made no move to greet me. That was normal. Nathan rarely initiated any interaction. Jessica rushed through instructions while David hauled in Nathan's belongings: medications for anxiety, his weighted blanket, the special plates he preferred, the tablet with his communication apps. The list went on. They'd packed enough for a month, though they hoped to be back within a week. "He's been doing better lately," Jessica said, though her eyes told a different story. She looked exhausted, older than her 39 years. "The new therapist thinks he might start talking eventually. We just have to be patient. He'll be fine here," I assured her. "You two focus on your mom. Nathan and I will hold down the fort." David knelt down to Nathan's level. "Remember what we talked about, buddy? You're staying with Grandpa for a little while. We'll video call every day, okay?" He held out his fist for a bump. Nathan tapped it lightly, his face expressionless. They left in a flurry of final reminders and apologies. I watched their taillights disappear down the street, then turned to find Nathan standing in my living room, still clutching that orca. The house suddenly felt very quiet. "Well, Nathan," I said, keeping my voice gentle, and even as I'd learned to do, "how about we get you settled in? Are you hungry?" He shook his head once. "Thirsty? Would you like some juice?" Another head shake. "Okay, let me show you your room, and then maybe we can watch a movie or play a game. Whatever you'd like." I led him upstairs to the guest room. I'd prepared it as best I could, clearing out the exercise equipment and setting up the bed with fresh sheets. Nathan walked in, looked around with that careful, assessing gaze he had, and then sat on the edge of the bed with his backpack still on. "You can unpack if you want," I offered. "Or I can help you." He unzipped the backpack and began removing items with methodical precision. His tablet, a change of clothes, his toothbrush, a small notebook with a pen attached. That notebook was his primary communication tool. He'd write questions or requests and show them to people. It was slow, but it worked. I left him to it and went downstairs to make myself a cup of tea. The November rain had started, drumming against the windows of my small rancher. I'd moved here after Elizabeth died, unable to stay in the house we'd shared for 30 years. This place was smaller, more manageable, but it felt lonely sometimes. Having Nathan here would be different. Challenging, maybe, but at least I wouldn't be alone. I was steeping my tea when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway. He'd changed into pajamas, even though it was only 7 in the evening. He held up his notebook. "Can I have water?" "Of course." I filled a glass from the filtered pitcher in my fridge and handed it to him. He drank half of it standing there, then wrote again. "Thank you. You're very welcome." He lingered for a moment, and I got the sense he wanted to say something else, but he just turned and went back upstairs. I heard the guest room door close softly. The first 2 days passed uneventfully. Nathan kept to himself mostly, spending hours on his tablet with headphones on. I made his meals, which he ate with mechanical efficiency. We watched nature documentaries together in the evenings. He seemed to particularly enjoy the ones about marine life. Sometimes he'd point at the screen when something interested him, and I'd nod and comment. It wasn't much, but it felt like communication. I spoke to David twice a day. Jessica's mother was stable but would need extensive rehabilitation. They'd probably be gone for 2 weeks, maybe more. David sounded guilty every time we talked. "I'm sorry to dump this on you, Dad. You're not dumping anything. Nathan is family. Besides, we're doing just fine, aren't we, Nathan?" Nathan, who was usually in the room during these calls, would nod once and go back to whatever he was doing. On the third evening, I wasn't feeling well. Nothing serious, just a nagging headache and some fatigue. I was 67, after all, and my blood pressure had been creeping up at my last checkup. My doctor had prescribed medication and told me to watch my stress levels and sodium intake. I'd been pretty good about it, but maybe the change in routine was affecting me more than I realized. I took my blood pressure medication with dinner as usual. The pills came from a weekly organizer I'd set up every Sunday. White tablets for blood pressure, small yellow ones for cholesterol, and a baby aspirin for heart health. It was the routine of aging, unglamorous but necessary. Nathan sat across from me at the dinner table, pushing pasta around his plate. He'd barely eaten. I was about to ask if something was wrong with the food, when he suddenly stood up, grabbed his notebook, and wrote furiously. He thrust it toward me. "Don't take the white pills." I blinked at the message. "What?" He wrote again, faster this time, his hand shaking slightly. "Don't take white pills. Dad switched them." The words didn't make sense. I stared at Nathan, at this silent child who communicated only through gestures and written words, and tried to understand what he meant. "Nathan, I don't understand. What do you mean your dad switched them?" He grabbed the notebook back and wrote more, his face twisted with an intensity I'd never seen from him. 3 weeks ago, I saw. He switched your pills. They're not medicine." My stomach went cold. "Nathan, this is very important. Are you sure about what you're saying?" He nodded vigorously, then did something that made my heart stop. He spoke, "Grandpa." His voice was rough, unused, barely above a whisper, but it was a voice. "Don't take the pills." I sat frozen, the fork still in my hand. Nathan had never spoken. Not in 6 years. Not according to anyone. And now he was speaking, warning me about something impossible. Something that made no sense. "Nathan," I said slowly. "Did you just speak?" "Yes." The word came out more clearly this time. "I can talk. I've always been able to talk. But Mom said if I ever talked, if I told anyone what I knew, she'd send me away. She'd put me somewhere bad, where kids go who tell lies." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. "What are you saying? What do you know?" "I know Dad is going to kill you." The words tumbled out now, faster, as if a dam had broken. I heard them talking. Mom and Dad, at night when they thought I was asleep. They need money, a lot of money. They owe people, bad people. And you have a house and savings and a life insurance policy. If you die, they get everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. That's not possible. David wouldn't. He didn't want to at first. Nathan's voice cracked. He cried. I heard him crying. But Mom kept saying they didn't have a choice. That those people would hurt them, hurt me, if they didn't pay. And the only way to get that much money fast was through you. How do you know about the pills? I followed them. 3 weeks ago when they came to visit you. They brought lunch, remember? Mom distracted you in the living room while Dad went to your bathroom. I watched from the hallway. He opened your medicine cabinet and switched the pills in your organizer. He put the real ones in his pocket and left different ones. I didn't know what to do. Mom already told me what happens to kids who tell secrets. My mind was reeling. I thought back to 3 weeks ago. David and Jessica had indeed visited. It was a Sunday. They'd brought Chinese food. Jessica had wanted to show me photos from Nathan's school on her phone, while David had excused himself to use the bathroom. I hadn't thought anything of it. Why would I? What kind of pills did he leave instead? I asked. I don't know. But I heard Mom say later that it would take a few weeks, that it would look natural, like a stroke or heart attack, something that happens to old people. Old people. The casual cruelty of that phrase, spoken in my grandson's unused voice, hit me harder than it should have. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Nathan flinched. "I'm not angry at you," I said quickly. "You did the right thing telling me, but I need to check something." I went to my bathroom, Nathan following close behind. My hands trembled as I opened the medicine cabinet and took out the weekly pill organizer. I dumped the remaining white pills into my palm. They looked identical to my blood pressure medication. Same size, same shape, same white coating. But Nathan was right about one thing. There had been a change in the past few weeks. I'd been feeling worse, more tired, occasional dizzy spells, mild confusion at times. I'd attributed it to stress, to aging, to loneliness. What if it was something else? "I need to make a phone call," I said. I called my doctor's emergency line. It took 20 minutes to get through to the on-call physician, a young woman named Dr. Patel, who listened to my explanation with professional calm. "Mr. Chen, this is a serious allegation. I'm going to need you to bring those pills in immediately. Can you come to the hospital? It's 8 o'clock at night, and I have my grandson with me. Bring him. If what you're describing is true, you may have been ingesting something toxic. We need to identify it and start treatment if necessary." The drive to Victoria General Hospital was surreal. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, still in his pajamas with a coat thrown over them. He hadn't stopped talking since that first sentence. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said for the third time. "I was scared. Mom said they'd take me away from you and Dad, that I'd go to a place where they put bad kids who make up stories." "You're not making up stories," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "And nobody's taking you anywhere." She also said if I ever talked, ever let anyone know I could talk, she'd know I was telling secrets. So I stayed quiet. For 6 years, I made everyone think I couldn't talk so she'd never know. 6 years. Since he was 4 years old. This child had maintained an elaborate silence for 6 years to protect himself from a mother who'd threatened him. The scope of it was staggering. "Why did you decide to tell me now?" I asked. "Because I heard them on the phone last night. Mom called Dad. She asked if you'd taken your medicine today. She asked if you seemed sick yet. She sounded happy. And I realized if I didn't say something, you'd die. And I don't want you to die, Grandpa. You're the only one who's ever been nice to me." My vision blurred with tears. I blinked them back, focusing on the road. At the hospital, we were taken to a private examination room. I handed over the pills. Dr. Patel, a slight woman with kind eyes, listened to Nathan's story again, while a nurse took my blood pressure and temperature. "Your BP is quite low," the nurse noted. "Given that you're on blood pressure medication, that's concerning." Dr. Patel bagged the pills carefully. "We'll send these to the lab for analysis. It'll take a few hours for preliminary results. In the meantime, I want to run a full blood panel on you, Mr. Chen. If you've been taking something inappropriate, we need to know what it is and assess the damage." They drew what felt like a dozen vials of blood. Nathan sat in the corner, watching everything with those careful eyes. At some point, a social worker appeared and asked to speak with him privately. I started to object, but Nathan stood up. "It's okay, Grandpa. I'll tell them everything." He was gone for almost an hour. I sat alone in the examination room, my mind spinning through the past few weeks, the past few years. David had always struggled financially. He'd made bad investments in cryptocurrency. He'd tried to start a business that failed, but I'd helped him. I'd loaned him money twice, which he'd paid back. I'd assumed things were better. Jessica had always been harder to read. She was polished, professional, working as a paralegal at a downtown firm, but there was a coldness to her that I'd attributed to stress. She was Nathan's mother. Surely she loved him. Surely she wouldn't threaten her own child. Except she had. For 6 years. Dr. Patel returned near midnight. Her expression was grim. "Mr. Chen, the preliminary analysis shows that those pills are not blood pressure medication. They're a mixture of substances designed to mimic symptoms of declining health. Elevated clonidine levels, which would lower your blood pressure dangerously. Some beta blockers mixed in. Essentially, someone created a cocktail that would cause you to have what appeared to be cardiac episodes while masking the actual cause. If you'd continued taking these for another week or two, you likely would have had a serious medical event. A stroke, a heart attack, possibly fatal." The room tilted again. I gripped the armrests of my chair. "What do I do? First, we treat you. You're showing signs of medication toxicity, but we caught it relatively early. We'll flush your system, monitor you overnight. Second, you need to contact the police. This is attempted murder." The police arrived within an hour. 2 officers, a middle-aged man named Constable Morrison and a younger woman named Constable Lee, took detailed statements from both Nathan and me. Nathan told his story again, more confidently this time. He described the night 3 weeks ago. He described the phone conversations he'd overheard. He even mentioned seeing documents on his father's laptop about my life insurance policy and the equity in my house. "Your grandson is very observant," Constable Morrison said quietly, "and very brave. He's been protecting himself for 6 years," I said, "because his mother threatened him. We'll need to verify his claims. But if what he's saying is true, we're looking at conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, and several other charges. Do you know where your son and daughter-in-law are currently?" "Edmonton. Jessica's mother is in the hospital there." Constable Lee made a note. "We'll coordinate with Edmonton police. In the meantime, you and Nathan will need to stay somewhere safe. Do you have other family?" I shook my head. "My wife passed away. David is my only child. I have a sister in Toronto, but we're not close. Friends? Yes, I can call someone." I ended up calling my former teaching colleague, Martin, who lived 10 minutes away. He arrived at 1 in the morning, bewildered but immediately helpful. "You and the boy can stay as long as you need," he said. What kind of world is this, where a son tries to kill his own father? We were discharged from the hospital at 3 in the morning with instructions to return if I felt any symptoms of distress. Martin took us to his home, a cozy bungalow where his wife Ruth had prepared the guest room. Nathan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the emotional toll of finally speaking after so many years. I couldn't sleep. I sat in Martin's living room, drinking chamomile tea Ruth had made, trying to process everything. "The boy saved your life," Martin said, sitting beside me. "If he hadn't spoken up when he did, I'd be dead within a week or two, and they'd have gotten away with it. What happens now? I don't know. What happened was swift and thorough. The police in Edmonton located David and Jessica at the hospital where Jessica's mother was recovering. They were brought in for questioning. Initially, both denied everything. David insisted Nathan was mentally unstable, that his claims were fabrications from a troubled child. Jessica maintained she'd never threatened Nathan, that he'd always been unable to speak, that this was some kind of stress-induced delusion. But then the evidence started mounting. The toxicology report confirmed the pills were a deliberate poison, not a pharmaceutical error. The police obtained a warrant for David and Jessica's financial records, which revealed over $200,000 in debt. Gambling debts, primarily. Jessica had been betting on sports, online poker, casino games. She'd hidden it from David initially, then confessed when the creditors started threatening violence. That's when they'd hatched their plan. David's laptop contained searches for undetectable poisons, how to fake natural death, and life insurance payout timelines. His browser history showed he'd researched my health conditions and looked for medications that could be substituted without obvious detection. Most damning were the text messages between David and Jessica from the night they'd switched my pills. "It's done," David had written. "In about 3 weeks, maybe a month, he'll have a cardiac event. The doctor will think it's natural given his age and condition. We'll be clear." Jessica's response: "Make sure the kid doesn't see anything. Last thing we need is him somehow communicating what happened." They'd known Nathan could observe and understand. They just didn't think he could or would tell anyone. The police also discovered that Jessica's mother hadn't had a stroke at all. She was fine. Jessica had fabricated the emergency to get Nathan into my care at this specific time, knowing they'd be unavailable when I inevitably had my medical emergency. They'd planned to return for the funeral, play the grieving son and daughter-in-law, and collect their inheritance. David broke first under questioning. He confessed everything. He claimed it was mostly Jessica's idea, that she'd pressured him, that he'd been terrified of the people they owed money to. He cried, apparently. He said he loved me but didn't see any other way out. Jessica never confessed. She maintained her innocence even as the evidence piled up. When confronted with Nathan's testimony, she claimed he was lying, that he'd always been mentally disturbed, that this was revenge for being a strict mother. They were both arrested and charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and child endangerment. Nathan's testimony that Jessica had threatened him for 6 years to maintain his silence added the child abuse charges. The preliminary hearing was in January. Nathan had to testify. He was terrified, despite having a victim services worker with him. I sat in the courtroom and watched my 10-year-old grandson describe, in his still rough voice, how his mother had told him when he was 4 that if he ever spoke, she'd send him away to a place for bad children. How she'd reinforced this threat regularly throughout his childhood. How he'd taught himself to read in secret, to observe everything, because he knew something was wrong in his house, but had no way to communicate it safely. Jessica stared at him from the defense table with cold eyes. David couldn't look at him at all. The judge ordered both defendants held without bail. The trial was scheduled for April. In the meantime, Nathan came to live with me permanently. The court granted me emergency custody, given the circumstances. We moved back into my house in Victoria, though I had new locks installed and a security system. I also got a new prescription for actual blood pressure medication and saw my doctor weekly to monitor my recovery. Nathan started speaking more easily as the weeks passed. His voice grew stronger, more confident. He'd spent 6 years silent, but now he made up for it. He asked questions constantly. About history, about science, about my life, about his future. "Will I have to go back to them?" he asked one night, as we did dishes together. "No, never. The court will make sure of that. But they're my parents. Biologically, yes. But parents are supposed to protect their children, Nathan, not threaten them, not use them as pawns. You'll stay with me for as long as you need. What if you die? Not because of them, just because you're old?" I smiled despite the grimness of the question. "I'm 67, not ancient, but I've already spoken to a lawyer. If anything happens to me, you'll go to my sister in Toronto. She's a good person. She'll take care of you." He processed this, then nodded. "Okay, Nathan, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Before they switched the pills? You must have heard them planning it." He was quiet for a long moment, drying a plate with careful attention. "I thought about it, but I was scared you wouldn't believe me. Adults never believed me about anything because I couldn't talk. Teachers thought I was stupid. Doctors thought I was broken. Even you and Dad thought I didn't understand things. How was I supposed to make you believe something so crazy? By talking, like you did. But if I talked, Mom would know I was telling secrets, and she'd send me away before I could help you. I had to wait until the right moment, when it would matter, when someone would have to listen. The logic was heartbreaking. A child calculating the precise moment when his voice would carry enough weight to save a life. "You did the right thing," I said. "You saved my life, Nathan. I'll never forget that." The trial in April was brief. David's confession and the mountain of physical evidence left little room for defense. David pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He received 12 years with possibility of parole after 8. Jessica refused to plead and was convicted on all counts after a 3-day trial. She received 20 years with no possibility of parole for 15. Nathan didn't attend the sentencing. He was in school, finally. A small private school in Victoria that specialized in children who'd experienced trauma. He was thriving there. His teachers said he was remarkably bright, reading at a high school level, despite missing years of formal education. He'd taught himself through observation and secret reading, acquiring knowledge the way other children acquire languages. He also started therapy, A psychologist who specialized in childhood trauma worked with him twice a week. She said his 6-year silence was one of the most extreme cases of self-protective mutism she'd encountered. That he'd maintained it so perfectly, fooling doctors and therapists, spoke to an extraordinary level of self-control. But it also meant he'd carried an enormous burden alone. He's going to need years of support, Dr. Williams told me after one session. What his mother did to him, the fear she instilled, that doesn't just disappear. But he's resilient, and he has you. That makes all the difference. Nathan and I settled into a routine. Mornings were for school, afternoons were homework, then free time where he usually read or worked on the computer. He'd developed a fascination with marine biology. That stuffed orca whale still sat on his bed, but now he could tell me detailed facts about orcas, their social structures, their hunting techniques, their intelligence. Evenings were for dinner together and conversation. Real conversation. Nathan asked about my life, my career, Elizabeth. I told him stories about teaching, about the students I'd known, about historical events I'd witnessed. He absorbed it all with that same careful attention. "Grandpa," he said one evening in June as we walked along the beach near my house, "do you think Dad ever really loved me?" I'd been dreading this question. I think he did, in his own way. But he made terrible choices. He let fear and desperation override his love. That doesn't excuse what he did. What about Mom? That was harder. I don't know, Nathan. I'd like to think she loved you once. But what she did to you, the way she threatened you, that's not love. Love doesn't come with conditions like that. He picked up a smooth stone and threw it into the waves. I don't miss them. Is that bad? No, it's honest. And after everything they put you through, you're entitled to feel however you feel. I'm glad I'm with you. I'm glad you're with me too. We stood there watching the sun set over the Pacific. Grandfather and grandson, survivors of a betrayal neither of us could have imagined. Nathan had saved my life by breaking 6 years of silence. In return, I'd given him a safe place to finally use his voice. The legal aftermath continued for months. David and Jessica's assets were seized to pay their debts and legal fees. Their house was sold. Whatever remained would eventually go to Nathan when he turned 18, held in trust until then. I was named his legal guardian permanently. The court also granted him the right to change his last name if he chose. He decided to take Elizabeth's maiden name, Morrison, leaving behind the Chen that connected him to his father. Nathan Morrison, a new identity for a boy finding his voice. In September, nearly a year after that November evening when he'd first spoken, Nathan started 5th grade. He was slightly behind his peers socially but academically advanced. He made friends slowly, but genuinely. He joined the school's marine biology club. He smiled more often. One afternoon, his teacher called me in for a conference. I worried that something was wrong, but she was beaming. "Mr. Chen, I wanted to tell you that Nathan gave a presentation today about orcas, in front of the whole class. It was remarkable. Not just the content, but his confidence. He spoke for 15 minutes without notes. Some of the other students were in tears by the end, because he talked about how orcas protect their family members, about their loyalty. He's an exceptional young man. That evening, I asked Nathan about it. Were you nervous, speaking in front of everyone? He shrugged. A little. But then I remembered that I stayed silent for 6 years when I was scared, and that almost cost you your life. So now I figure, if I have something to say, I should say it. The worst that can happen is someone doesn't listen, but at least I tried. There was wisdom in that beyond his years. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary now. Nathan is 12, growing tall and lean. His voice deepened into something more adult. He still sees Dr. Williams, though less frequently. The nightmares about his mother have mostly stopped. He video calls my sister in Toronto regularly. They're planning for him to spend part of summer vacation there, getting to know his extended family. David writes letters from prison. They arrive every few months, addressed to both of us. I read them first. They're full of apologies and regrets, of explanations and justifications. David claims he's gotten sober, found religion, understands now how wrong he was. He wants Nathan to visit. He wants forgiveness. I give Nathan the letters unopened, and let him decide what to do with them. So far, he's put them all in a box in his closet, unread. Maybe someday, he says. When I'm older, when I'm ready to hear whatever he has to say. But not now. Jessica doesn't write. I don't expect she ever will. The local newspaper ran a story about the case last year. Boy's 6-year silence ends in time to save grandfather from attempted murder. They changed our names for Nathan's privacy. But people in Victoria knew. For a few weeks, strangers would recognize us at the grocery store or the library. Some offered sympathy. Others asked invasive questions. Nathan handled it with remarkable grace, usually just smiling and saying we didn't like to talk about it. The attention faded eventually, as attention does. We returned to being anonymous, just a grandfather and his grandson, living quietly by the sea. But I think about that November evening often, about the moment Nathan spoke for the first time in his life, to save mine, about the courage it took for a 10-year-old child to break a silence he'd maintained for survival, about how easily I could have dismissed his warning, attributed it to childish imagination or misunderstanding. I think about all the children out there who are silent for reasons adults don't understand. The ones labeled as delayed or difficult or different. The ones who see everything but have no safe way to speak. Nathan was lucky. He found his moment, his voice, his chance. How many others never do? There's a lesson in this, though it's one I paid dearly to learn. We underestimate children constantly. We assume their silence means ignorance, that their youth means naivety. We talk around them and over them, believing they don't comprehend the gravity of adult situations. But Nathan understood everything. He watched, he learned, he calculated. He survived by pretending to be less than he was, and then he saved a life by revealing his true self. If there's anything I want people to take from our story, it's this. Listen to children. Really listen. Not just to their words when they speak, but to their silence when they don't. Watch how they behave. What frightens them? What makes them withdraw? Because sometimes a child's silence isn't a deficit, it's a defense. And sometimes the bravest thing a child can do is break that silence, even when they've been threatened into maintaining it. Nathan didn't just save my life that November evening. He saved his own. By speaking, he freed himself from 6 years of fear and control. He proved to himself that his mother's threats were hollow, that telling the truth wouldn't destroy him, but would instead bring justice and safety. Now he speaks all the time. Sometimes too much, in that way 12-year-olds do when they're excited about something. He'll talk for an hour about the documentary he watched or the book he read, and I listened to every word, grateful beyond measure that he found his voice and chose to use it. We have a good life together now. Not the life either of us planned or expected, but a good one nonetheless. We cook meals side by side. We explore tide pools on weekends. We read books and watch documentaries. We talk about everything from history to science to feelings. Last week, Nathan asked if he could get a dog. A big one, he specified. For protection, though I suspect it's more for companionship. Sure, I said. Let's go to the shelter this weekend. Thanks, Grandpa. For everything. For believing me. For keeping me safe. For letting me stay. Nathan, you're not staying. This is your home, for as long as you want it to be. He smiled at that, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. The kind of smile I never saw in the years when he was silent. Tonight, as I write this, Nathan is upstairs doing homework. I can hear music playing from his room, something with guitars and drums that teenagers like. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The sounds of a child who no longer has to hide who he is or what he knows. In 2 days, we have a court hearing. The final custody arrangement will be formalized. Nathan will legally be my son, not just my grandson. He'll take my last name if he wants. We'll be a family, officially and permanently. I'm 69 now. I take real blood pressure medication, carefully verified by my pharmacist. I see my doctor regularly. I'm in good health, all things considered. With luck, I'll be around to see Nathan graduate high school, maybe college. To see him become whoever he's meant to be. But even if I'm not, even if age catches up with me sooner than we hope, I know Nathan will be okay. He survived 6 years of psychological abuse. He outsmarted adults who underestimated him. He found his voice when it mattered most. Those skills, that strength, that will carry him through whatever life brings. As for David and Jessica, I try not to hate them. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend on Nathan, but I don't forgive them either. What they did to their own child, what they tried to do to me, those aren't things that can be easily forgiven. David will get out of prison eventually, older and presumably wiser. Jessica won't see freedom until she's nearly 60. By then, Nathan will be a grown man with his own life. He'll never have to face them if he doesn't want to. The truth is, they lost everything. Their freedom, their son, their future. All because they chose greed and violence over honesty and hard work. All because they underestimated a silent child. And that child, my grandson, my son, the boy who saved my life with 4 words. He's upstairs right now, probably reading about whales or doing algebra, or maybe just being 12. He's safe. He's loved. He's free to be himself without fear. That's the ending our story deserves. Not a tragedy, but a triumph. Not silence, but truth. Not isolation, but family. Nathan Morrison found his voice. And I found a reason to make sure I'm around for a long time to come, so I can keep listening to everything he has to say.